Hello, everyone. Today we will conduct the study of the free upper limb bones. The humerus consists of one body and an upper end as well as a lower end. The upper end has a hemispherical humeral head facing upward, backward, and medially, which articulates with the glenoid cavity of the scapula. The circular groove around the head is called the anatomical neck. There are prominent major tubercle and lesser tubercle on the lateral and anterior sides of the humeral head respectively. Each of them extends downward into a ridge, called the major tubercle ridge and lesser tubercle ridge. There is a longitudinal groove between the two tubercles, called the intertubercular sulcus. The junction between the upper end and the body is slightly thin, called the surgical neck, which is prone to fracture. The upper half of the humeral body is cylindrical, and the lower half is triangular prism-shaped. There is a rough deltoid tuberosity on the lateral surface of the middle part, which is the attachment site of the deltoid muscle. There is a shallow groove running obliquely from the upper medial to the lower lateral in the middle of the posterior surface, called the sulcus for radial nerve. The radial nerve and deep brachial artery pass along this groove. A fracture in the middle of the humerus may injure the radial nerve. There is a nutrient foramen opening upward near the midpoint of the medial margin. The lower end is relatively flat. There is a hemispherical capitulum humeri on the anterior surface of the lateral part, which articulates with the radius. There is a trochlear-shaped trochlear of humerus on the medial part, which forms a joint with the ulna. There is a fossa above the anterior surface of the trochlea, called the coronoid fossa. There is a fossa above the anterior surface of the capitulum humeri, called the radial fossa. There is a fossa above the posterior surface of the trochlea, called the olecranon fossa, which accommodates the olecranon of the ulna when the elbow is extended. There is a protrusion on the lateral side of the capitulum and the medial side of the trochlea, called the lateral epicondyle and medial epicondyle respectively. There is a shallow groove behind the medial epicondyle, called the sulcus for ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve passes through here. The junction between the lower end and the body, that is, slightly above the medial and lateral epicondyles of the humerus. The bone is relatively weak, and a supracondylar fracture of the humerus may occur due to violence. The major tubercle of the humerus, as well as the medial and lateral epicondyles, can all be palpated on the body surface. The radius is located on the lateral part of the forearm, consisting of one body and two ends. The upper end is enlarged, called the radial head. There is an articular fossa on the upper surface of the head, which articulates with the capitulum humeri. The surrounding circular articular surface articulates with the ulna. The part below the head is slightly thin, called the radial neck. There is a protrusion on the medial lower side of the neck, called the radial tuberosity. The radial body is triangular, prism-shaped, and its medial margin is a thin and sharp interosseous margin. The lower end is concave anteriorly, and the downward protrusion on the lateral side is called the styloid process of radius. There is an articular surface on the medial surface of the lower end called the ulnar notch, which articulates with the ulnar head. There is a carpal articular surface on the lower surface which articulates with the carpal bones. The styloid process of radius and radial head can be palpated on the body surface. The ulna is located on the medial part of the forearm, consisting of one body and two ends. The upper end is thick and large, with a semicircular deep concave on the anterior surface, called the trochlear notch, which articulates with the trochlear of humerus. The protrusion on the posterior upper side of the notch is called the olecranon. The protrusion on the anterior lower side is called the coronoid process. There is a radial notch on the lateral surface of the coronoid process, which articulates with the radial head. The rough prominence below the coronoid process is called the ulnar tuberosity. The upper segment of the ulnar body is thick and the lower segment is thin. Its lateral margin is sharp, which is the interosseous margin, and is opposite to the interosseous margin of the radius. The lower end is the ulnar head, with circular articular surfaces on its anterior, lateral, and posterior sides, which articulates with the ulnar notch of the radius. The lower surface is smooth and separated from the carpal bones by a triangular articular disc. The conical protrusion on the posterior medial side of the head is called the styloid process of ulna. Under normal circumstances, the styloid process of ulna is approximately 1 centimeter higher than the styloid process of radius. The olecranon, the entire length of the posterior margin, the ulnar head, and the styloid process can all be palpated on the body surface. Fracture of distal radius is mostly caused by indirect external forces. When falling, the elbow is extended, the forearm pronates, the wrist dorsiflexes, and the palm lands on the ground. Stress acts on the distal radius, resulting in a fracture. Fracture of distal radius is shown on the X-ray film. The hand bone includes carpal bone, metacarpal bone, and phalanges. There are 8 carpal bones, arranged in proximal and distal rows. The proximal row, from radial to ulnar side, consists of the scaphoid bone, lunate bone, triquetral bone, and pisiform bone. The distal row consists of the trapezium bone, trapezoid bone, capitate bone, and hamate bone. The 8 carpal bones are connected to form a carpal groove with a concave palmar surface. The adjacent articular surfaces of each bone form intercarpal joints. The proximal parts of the scaphoid bone, lunate bone, and triquetral bone form an oval articular surface, which forms the radiocarpal joint together with the carpal articular surface of the radius and the articular disc below the ulnar head. 2. There are 5 metacarpal bones, which are the 1st to 5th metacarpals in order from radial to ulnar side. The proximal end of the metacarpal bone is the base, which connects to the carpal bone. The distal end is the head, which connects to the phalange, and the middle part is the body. The first metacarpal bone is short and thick, with a saddle-shaped articular surface on its base, which articulates with the saddle-shaped articular surface of the trapezium bone. Well, today we have studied the shoulder girdle bone. In the next class, we will start the study of the pelvic girdle bones. Thank you.